So I'm talking more about the modern intellectual tradition from Descartes to Derrida. How do I say that?
It's French, so it's Descartes. And
Yeah.
I think it's Derrida.
Derrida?
I think it's French, so you kind of accent the last syllable. Although, strictly speaking, I think there's an accent on the first syllable. I don't think it's French for his ancestors.
James is having ginger, carrot, and turmeric.
That one's going to be
And here, oh, I forgot my glass. I'm gonna go get it.
I'll hold on to this so it doesn't fly to Coaldale.
Why don't you talk about the coronavirus some more? The latest updates while I'm gone.
Coronavirus. Well, you know how they say no news is good news? There's news. So, not that good. Looks as though it's getting out of control. More countries getting it. I don't think Canada has closed borders to China yet, or to Iran. I think they put something of an advisory out near the end of January. It's been a little over a month since then. But, I don't know what people are thinking. Well, I was checking out something, like some person got back, I think, from Iran. And they were wandering around for days ago. They went to a clinic. The Canadian government is not mentioning what clinic that was. People are on the internet saying, what clinic was it? So
they'd know, if they went to the same
what
clinic.
the government is saying, don't panic. Well, anyone who's been to a clinic
is now panicking. Exactly.
And they're asking, where were they? Were they going to supermarkets? The government going because they're afraid, I guess, that people are going to hunt the person down who was wandering around after being in Iran. I don't know what people are thinking. Here's the deal. If you've been to some place like that, they don't require a quarantine, which is crazy. It should be like, it looks as though the stuff can be passed on after about 27 days. It should be a month-long quarantine, maybe longer, depending on what the data seems to indicate. But, the people running governments, even, like the dictators are automatically fools. But our elected officials are absolutely nuts. The Americans have been cutting back on their health system, and they're going to pay for it. They're going to pay for it. Even the big guys. The funny thing is, I was joking to Pauline. I was saying, someone was joking about the possibility of Donald Trump getting wiped out by it, and I'm going, Bernie Sanders is, I think, older than Donald Trump, and Joe Biden's older than both of those. And Bernie Sanders might be the same age. There might be no one running for president. Wouldn't that be cool? Someone would come to the
They're wealthy enough, they'd keep themselves.
Well, they're more likely to survive. Walking around campaigning in hazmat suits, kissing babies in hazmat suits. Babies might be in hazmat suits, who knows? Anyway, it's just like a comedy of errors, unfortunately, for a lot of people already. It's been a tragic comedy, and tragedies usually end in a death, so a lot of them.
You don't have to eat all that pepper at once. It's a lot of pepper.
It's a fair amount.
Anyway, so he's drinking hot lemon and honey, which I'm also having, it's not hot.
I think I'm going to save that until later, but because I can only take one power drink. Shall we call them super power drinks?
It's not a power drink. It's yummy. Oh, you don't find these yummy, though. You don't like lemon.
Lemon is hard on my GERD that I get with the cancer that I've got.
And I'm having Wise Woman tomato soup, which I made a long time ago and canned. And James is having a tuna sandwich with broccoli sprouts on an organic loaf of bread, a couple slices.
Awesome.
But that bread is, the first ingredient is organic white flour.
Yeah.
And I don't know
sounds pretty good, but not
what
that good.
the white plant is. which they grind the flour from,
Mm.
or even if it's a plant at all.
Yeah.
I don't know where white comes from.
Could be flour from sawing up a birch tree. So. Ah,
don't
well.
know. But I was happy because the organic carrots were on sale at Save-On today, and it's 15% Tuesday. And these apples were on sale too, and the grapes. So, like all of the stuff that I
Yeah, this is a real healthy
eating
meal.
James
Let
today
me
was
tell
on
you.
sale. So
Yeah.
that's terrific.
Yeah, I'll start out with maybe the healthiest part, but the least
Pleasurable.
appetizing
Yeah.
part. Yeah.
So like I mentioned, I'm talking about this philosophy stuff. It's I'm now on lecture 8. Well, I'm finished. We're finished watching, but talking about the notes from lecture 8. Kant, Immanuel Kant.
What can't you do? Just kidding.
Changed philosophy forever by arguing that the human mind does not passively receive sense experience, but actively constructs it. The first problem for Kant is to try to find an answer to Hume's critique of causality and of all scientific knowledge, for without such an answer, Kant recognized neither science nor philosophy could claim necessarily true knowledge about the world. In Kant's language, Hume's category of relations of ideas are both a priori, independent of experience, and analytic. Hume's matters of fact are posteriori.
Posteriori. Now posteriori.
Okay.
So they come after. They're not like
Oh
givens,
yes,
right?
dependent on experience, and synthetic, or not true by definition. Rather than imagining that our cognition conforms to objects or experience, he asked, what if objects of experience conform to our cognition? What if cognition is active and not merely passive? What Kant is claiming is the mind actively grasps and organizes experience. The parallel postulate in Euclidean geometry states that given a plane and a line in a plane, and then a point not on that line, there is at most one line that can be drawn through that point parallel to the other line. And this is what he used to disprove Hume. Now, I look at this and I'm like, that's no better than the sun rising every day. It doesn't mean anything to me. So he did not disprove Hume, if that's what he's going with, that he says, oh, yeah, we don't have to worry about that anymore. This is not convincing. So if this is what science, what everybody who followed, the philosophers and said, and scientists decided, okay, well then Hume is disproven and we can just carry on business as usual, then not good enough. Work harder. You'd say it's from experience. I don't know what I was writing. Okay. He defeated Hume's skepticism regarding science by making synthetic a priori knowledge possible, that is, a priori knowledge about real things, not just words, definitions, and concepts. The source of this is a priori knowledge about the world. It's from our own minds, not from things in themselves, and about things in themselves. We can know nothing whatsoever. So, yeah, I didn't think much of Kant, honestly. I thought he was just grasping.
Yeah, could be.
He was doing there's a lot here about Kant, and he seemed to be really doing a lot and getting nowhere. So he was just spinning his wheels. So lecture 9, while we
He's one of the biggies. I'm not sure why.
Have knowledge of experience and synthetic a priori knowledge of the forms of experience, we can have no knowledge whatsoever of things in themselves, which are beyond the bounds of a possible experience. We know appearances only, not things in themselves, independent of appearances. Kant is saying, in effect, about that Hume was right. Reason for Kant is that part of the human cognitive faculty that is attempting to know everything, to push the bounds of knowledge as far as they can go. Reason is dialectical. When reason tries to know what cannot be known, it doesn't just peter out in skepticism, it actually comes up with an answer that makes no sense. What Kant argues in his moral philosophy is not only can we believe in God, the immorality of the soul, a future state, and free will, all four together.
Immortality of the soul.
Immortality, what did I say?
Immorality.
Oh,
It's
well,
a
that's
good pun.
different. All four together, those four ideas, not only can we must. Lecture 10. As Eckhart put it, I am God. God is in everything. God is everything, therefore I am God.
Fascinating. Meister Eckhart, I think they call it.
Boehm? How do you say that? Boehm?
Birma.
Huh.
So you umlaut the O. Birma.
Okay. Believed God develops, God changes over time, God is not fixed, God moves from a state of lack of self-awareness to a state of complete self-awareness. And now, lecture 13, we're talking about Marx. Marx's critique of capitalism and vision of communism went unapplied until 1917 in Russia, and I disagree. I don't think it was actually applied there. Because you have to come through the capitalist machine to be pooped out the other end and have a socialist revolution, right? So they did not have that.
Not even close in Russia. It was basically a peasant aristocratic society. It was insane to try to have an industrial communist revolution. And it's no accident that it ended up being a disaster.
Marx felt it was the proletariat, which specifically means industrial workers, factory workers, who had revolutionary potential. He feared that the rural peasantry and the unemployed, or we might say the homeless, the lumpen proletariat, were actually conservative forces.
So when you say lumpen proletariat, he's talking about the unemployed, not the peasants as well. So lumpen proletariat means rag people, basically. Lumpen means rag.
Okay.
So it's unemployed, it's riffraff, it's criminals. He came up with a list. I'm not, and it included, I love it. So prostitutes, pimps. I might be adding some to it. I'll be leaving some out. But what I love is litterateurs, which are basically writers of poetry and writers.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
They're a part of the group.
I would maintain he was a member of the lumpen proletariat.
Yeah. It's not just a class struggle. It also depends on the technology, because the technology of the production of what is needed by human society, who owns that technology, determines what the ruling class in that society is. You're going to do what I tell you because I have the money. So that's the basis of the capitalist sort of thing.
Well, that's part of it. It's partly just how the machines. I'm your potential employer. Aristocrats had money, but the way they pushed people around was by threat of force.
So
capitalists push you around by not employing you.
Yeah. So then he continues about modern capitalism. It has converted the physician, the lawyer, the priest, the poet into its paid wage laborers. The bourgeoisie has torn away from the family its sentimental veil and has reduced the family relation to a mere money relation. And, I have some lecture notes on the back of that. I wonder where I'm supposed to read those. Lecture 15. We're talking about Nietzsche now. He was a brilliant young student of ancient languages, achieving a professorship at an unheard of age of 24. The Apollonian spirit is rationality, moderation, and light, and these were the aspects of ancient Greek civilization that everybody interpreted to be the essence of Greek culture. But Nietzsche points out, just as important There was another side to Greek culture. It was embodied in the cult of Dionysus, the god of drunkenness and destruction. If you want some confirmation of this, you can look at some of the Greek tragedies. What Nietzsche claimed is that both sides, creation of beautiful structure in a very broad, vague sense, and the urge to destroy, tear things apart, and reduce them to their most fundamental components. These two impulses are at war in Greek culture. The Apollonian spirit covers over the pain of existence with what Nietzsche called a beautiful dream image. The Dionysian spirit in Greek culture revels in the pain, losing the individuality of the sufferer, surrendering to the chaos of nature's power, hence identifying with it through a loss of ego. Oh, that's way later. Nietzsche literally thinks that Christianity has made Western civilization sick. The
genealogy of morals. Where is it?
Yeah, you know.
Genealogy of morals. You know? I've read my Nietzsche. I've read everything he published. And some he didn't publish in his life.
And you know how to actually read words aloud.
Sometimes. Sometimes everything is lost. So.
Nietzsche contrasts an aristocratic with a slave morality. Many ancient societies had slaves, including the Greeks, and before the Egyptians, the Jews were the slaves. He says, let's contrast the moral values of the aristocracy with the moral values of those who are slaves. This could literally include not just actual slaves, but indentured servants, peasants, etc. From the point of view of the aristocratic morality, the aristocrats valued above all power. So powerful is good, and weak is bad. What's good for the slave is precisely what is weak, because what is weak is not threatening. The slave regards as good themselves, and whatever else cannot harm the slaves. For the slaves, the opposite of what is good is evil. Evil is the label that slaves invent to describe these creatures that they resent and fear. In other words, the nobles themselves. The slaves' morality goes further. From the point of view of the slaves, they create God as a beloved judge who will reward them in the next life and, just as important, torture the powerful, the aristocrats, eternally in the fires of hell. This gives the slaves and the poor a meaning for their suffering. Nietzsche at one point said human beings can live with almost any kind of suffering as long as the suffering has a meaning. They can think of it as serving a purpose or having some payoff at the end. For the poor and the slaves, why remain alive? Only because there is a God. The God will reward us and will sit at the right hand of the Father in the afterlife. So those defeated by life, those lacking in strength or creativity to make this life meaningful, the losers, if you will, in life must invent a meaning in the next world, ruled by a new king, God, where they'll be rewarded, and this makes their suffering bearable. Slaves transform weakness into merit. From Nietzsche's point of view, to be a slave, one must intrinsically be a coward. If you're not a coward and someone tries to enslave you, you die trying to fight against the master. Those who don't do that become slaves. When the master whips me and I say to myself, I could fight back, but I shouldn't, because I'd be lowering myself to his level, and I'm better than that because God has taught me and I've learned not to fight back, I should turn the other cheek. What Nietzsche has to say is, I, the slave, have just transformed fear and cowardice into merit. I'm not fighting back, and that's true, but the reason is not that I'm afraid. The reason is I could fight back, but I freely choose not to fight back. It's a virtue that I'm not fighting back. The slaves live a life of guilt that they think that God wants from them. That is, God in some sense enjoys their guilt. The strange thing historically, Nietzsche says, the bizarre thing is that the slave morality won. That is, the Roman Empire converted to Christianity, which essentially meant the aristocrats who own the world, that is, the Roman world, came to accept the morality of slaves. And I say no. Marx
disagrees with it.
They just saw a way to exploit the masses with it. That's
Sure.
all. So
Marx in his that said, not just would say, religion is the opium of the people.
if you go back to Aristotle, one is supposed to have pride. In Christianity, it's a sin. Nietzsche did literally say that no act of torture, rape, or murder is intrinsically wrong. Because he says nature, which is the only reality, is intrinsically torturous, rapacious, and murderous. But this doesn't mean that he actually recommended cruelty. He believes that no culture can produce greatness without social order, so by no means would Nietzsche admire anarchy in the streets. He said a married philosopher is a joke. It occurred to him that perhaps...
That's just because every philosopher is a joke, but...
he would have to live this same life over and over an endless number of times. Nietzsche found the thought horrifying. If we view the world properly, joyfully affirm a world with no teleology, with no point outside itself, no direction of movement at all, nothing is true, everything is permitted.
No?
Freud is claiming, what Freud is claiming, oh dear, I didn't talk about the rest of the point, is that even as we control ourselves more successfully, we feel more guilty, for we cannot hide our now ever more unsatisfied and instinctual impulses from our own minds. We feel guilty over the unfulfilled aggressive wishes, even as we become more pacific in outward behavior. You know, I disagree with that too, because it's like, if you are an aggressive person, that may be the case, but like, I don't feel that I need an aggressive outlet. Maybe that's, you know, I'm just accepted over the course of life. I've accepted my position on the passive wall. So, I don't have a problem with it. I think it's great.